first and my only guest this evening is a wonderful man who's my friend, and I'm always happy when he's in Los Angeles, and that's why we are here tonight. Normally we wouldn't be doing a show on May the 22nd. But Stephen's in town. The lovely Stephen Fry, everybody. Stephen Fry. Stephen, it's lovely to see you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's a joy. It's nice to see you and nice to see Jeff. And talking of big penises...
yes.
I heard a wonderful pickup line the other day, which is, I've got 8 inches for you. Admittedly, in 2 installments.
That's nice.
That's rather sweet.
Were you the subject of this pickup line?
No, I just thought it was a good one. Apparently, women like wit and modesty and self-deprecation in men and aren't interested in large penises.
I think they're a little bit interested in large penises. I think there's
you did that?
Well, well, that's the amount of interest, not the size of the penis. So I think they're, they're probably like this much interested in this much penis. I think. I don't know. I'm not an expert on...
No, nor am I. No, nor am I.
All right, then.
Yeah. Sorry.
How, you know, since the last time you were here, I saw your documentary, or I've seen your... What is the right way to say it? Seen it or saw?
I saw.
Observed your documentary series on the United States, where you covered the entire 50 states.
Each state, that's
Each state, and you drove around them in a London taxi.
I did, yes. The 48 contiguous were in the taxi and then flew to Alaska and Hawaii.
Yeah, it's very difficult to get to Hawaii by taxi.
Though, oddly enough, I just finished a show called Gadget Man, in which I converted my taxi to an amphibious vehicle and drove it along the Thames. We put a propeller in the back. We drove it off the road onto the Thames in the middle of London.
Bond, like
exactly, yeah.
Wow, that's...
At one point I was overtaken by a duck, so it wasn't fantastically effective. But it was the dream of a lifetime, and oddly no one seems to have done it, certainly on British television. Simply regard America as not a whole, but as 50 states.
It was an interesting thing to watch for me, because I've lived here for a long time, and I thought, I can't believe he went there and didn't go there. You know, it's like if you go to someone's hometown and you didn't go to the donut shop, what the hell's wrong with you? Did a lot of people get angry?
Usually the famous donut shop.
Right, exactly. Did people get angry with you about you didn't go to there?
Naturally. You can't do everything. I mean, it would have had to have been an hour for each state, which is great. You could easily do an hour on Texas or an hour on California. Slightly harder to do an hour on Delaware, say, or North Dakota, with all due respect to both of them, which are places.
My favourite, I think it was Iowa, when you went, Iowa is a lovely place with lovely things. And then we moved right on. I was like, you can't. People in Iowa are like, what the hell? Where are you going? We haven't shown you the donut shop.
The most amazing day, which just shows what documentary filming can be like, was when we started in Asheville, North Carolina, which is a very charming, very beautiful city, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we went up in a hot air balloon and looked over the Smoky Mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains. It was a gorgeous autumn, fall day with a blaze of scarlet and yellow maple and leaves of the most shiningly gorgeous colour that just speak New England, and it was heavenly. And the air was clean, and we lowered ourselves down, and I picked a maple leaf off a tree, and then we dropped, and then we drove all the way to Knoxville in Tennessee.
Been there too?
To the campus of the University of Tennessee. And I hadn't really been told about this. There was a woman waiting for me behind a chain-link fence. I got out of the cab, and the camera crew followed me, and she said, "Can you put on these gloves, please?" And I put on some latex gloves and some sort of paper shoes with the little... And then she opened a padlock of this, and I could see razor wire at the top, and she opened the gate, and I went in, and the gate was closed, and then I was aware of sort of things around me. It was a kind of garden, but there were sort of white bits and black bits, and I wasn't quite sure. And she said, "Welcome to this facility." And she said, "I'm going to introduce you to some individuals." She used the word individual of each of these, what turned out to be dead bodies. And it was the famous, in its own world, body farm, where people who leave their bodies to science, the cadavers are then put through all kinds of extraordinary experiences. And this is to help forensic anthropology.
You know, rate of decomposition
Bruce
and stuff.
Gus Grissom in CSI, the original CSI,
Right.
for example, you know, who could date a time of death according to the insect larvae that had begun to start.
Forensic science, like Sherlock Holmes, for example.
Exactly. But they learned all these kind of time of death things about the gruesome stuff of the grubs and the maggots in the body from this single place. It was the first of its kind. So what they'd often do is they'd take a body, they put it in wrap it in a carpet, put it in the trunk of a car for 3 days, and then bury it in the woods.
And this is legal?
Yeah. because that's so often what a murderer does. He kills someone in blind panic,
I see. Right.
wraps them in a carpet, puts them in the trunk of his car, gets blind drunk for 3 days, and then drives to the woods and buries it. Right. And there's a very particular pattern and so you know, sometimes the police need to prove that someone was murdered or wasn't.
By following...
Yeah.
Would you, when in the, you know, sure, a long time from now when you expire, would you have your body go through that?
That's the question I asked myself, because the thing that will never leave you, it just won't ever leave you, is the smell.
Yeah.
The smell of mortality is a most unpleasant thing. We're all lucky enough, almost all of us are lucky enough, never to have seen a human body, let alone smelt one in a state of decomposition.
Right.
And I went in never having seen a dead body. I'm not a Catholic, so I hadn't seen one in a casket.
Right.
I hadn't seen an embalmed one, you know. And I left having seen about 200, some of which were literally, there was one that had been put in a sort of dumper skip, whatever you call them, sort of big thing, rubbish, trash thing, and it was basically just a load of bones in a brown soup.
Did this
and the
traumatize you?
It was like Satan clawing his way up through my nostrils and trying to tear my brain out.
It's horrifying.
It is horrifying, but on the other hand, there's a strange optimism that comes over you that you realise how we are what Burroughs called a soft machine, and it breaks down instantly, and it goes back into the earth, you know, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It goes into the worms, and that's it. And it just makes you feel all the more determined to keep the bits that work,
going,
surprisingly, that don't rot.
Are you a believer in an afterlife? Does that
No, which is to say, I'm along with Plato and the Greeks. Anyone who tells you that they know what happens to you after you die is either a liar or a fool.
Yeah, I must say, it does seem to be a bit of guesswork going on, if you ask me.
Absolutely. I mean, the number of people who've said, honey, when I'm dead, I'll come back and visit you. And they happen not to.
This has happened to you personally, or just
not
you?
Personally,
Yeah, right.
But, you know, so people said to me, I saw a ghost, and I go, no, you didn't, dear.
Yeah. I wonder, are you, I mean, it does seem to, are you an atheist?
Yeah, I suppose I am. I take my cue from the great philosopher Bertrand Russell, who...
I love Bertrand Russell.
He's wonderful.
Yeah.
I advise anybody just to have a fun time on YouTube.
His autobiography?
Isn't it extraordinary?
Oh, it's hilarious.
It's very, very funny.
Yeah.
And he spoke in this beautiful, high, piping, extremely aristocratic voice.
Yeah.
He was Earl Russell, in fact. And he, you know, he came from a very distinguished family. His aunt danced with Napoleon, and he knew Robert Browning, and I met a man who knew him, which makes that connection
That's
really
very
weird.
nice, yeah.
But he was asked why he was an atheist, and he said, surely you mean agnostic, because you don't know there isn't a God.
Right.
He said, no, I don't know there isn't a God. That's quite true. He said, but I also don't know that there isn't a giant teapot orbiting Venus in such an angle and way that we will never see it. However, I am perfectly entitled to base my life on the supposition that such a teapot does not exist and not to allow my life to be determined by those who do believe in such a teapot. And that is my view about God.
I like Carl Sagan's thing about atheism, which he said, when people say, is there a God or is there not a God, he said, the question is too vague. You know, you have to define what do you mean by this. His idea, you know, him saying the idea of a large white man with a beard deciding what goes on in people's individual lives seemed absurd. But the idea that there was an intelligence beyond what he understood, the St. Augustine's kind of, you know, to understand the mind of God is like putting the ocean into a cup. That seems like a little more...
But it's a very new way of looking at the world, and indeed much of the world, most of the world, are animists, and they have many gods, and I think that's much more attractive. Why there should be one, it's very recent. There was one pharaoh who decided...
Akhenaten.
Akhenaten, exactly, and he was killed for it.
Yes, he was. They were very upset.
The priests decided...
Tutankhamun's dad.
That's right.
Because Tutankhamun's original name was Tutankhaten. And then he changed it back to Tutankhamun because his father was an idiot.
He's good.
Yes.
He's good.
Yes, I remember hearing about that.
King Tut's, exactly.
Yeah.
And he was the first, on record at least, as a monotheist who thought there was one God. But it's not natural to believe in one God. I would think quite natural to believe in a sort of principle of trees and a principle of rivers, and in the way that the Greeks did, which makes fantastic storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, it does, but people get very cross if you kind of suggest that perhaps
there's a passive-aggressive victim status that religious people now have, which is that they go, oh, these fundamental atheists. Well, I'm not a fundamentalist atheist. Being an atheist doesn't mean anything to me. I don't want anybody else to be an atheist. I have no interest in spreading atheism any more than if there was a word to describe someone who doesn't believe in the tooth fairy, a flimpist, for example, then I would have to say I'm a flimpist. But being a flimpist is meaningless. It just means I don't believe in the tooth fairy.
Right.
It doesn't involve a set of values. It doesn't involve... My set of values comes from humanism, from the Enlightenment, from the very set of values that built this country. The set of values that of Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson and people who actually thought for themselves and didn't take any text as gospel or any which Marxists did and which many religions do. I just think it's terrible to be told what's the case.
Well, the whole idea is it's meant to be free thought here.
Yeah,
isn't it?
free thought.
Yeah, I think it is.
Exactly.
We'll take a break so you can freely enjoy the products advertised, and we'll be right back. We'll be right back with Stephen Fry.